Ossining resident Robert McCallion brutally attacked and stabbed a 17-year-old young Black woman multiple times. She happened to be at an apartment complex in Ossining where McCallion lived and where she was visiting her father. McCallion punched her in the face, knocked her to the ground, placed her in a chokehold, and then attempted to gouge out her eyes with his thumbs. When the victim tried to escape and call for help, McCallion smashed her head into the concrete sidewalk multiple times and choked her again. He then proceeded to stab the victim, whose first name we are not using out of respect for her privacy, multiple times on her face, head, back, hands, and chest. She suffered serious and lasting injuries, including lacerations to her face, head, and kidney, a collapsed lung, and corneal abrasion in both eyes. This was, by any measure, one of the most vicious and brutal violent attacks we have ever seen. And even worse, it was fueled by ignorance and hate. As McCallion attacked this innocent teenager, he also shouted racial epithets and anti-Semitic epithets at her. He targeted her because she was Black. When McCallion attacked this young victim, he not only physically and emotionally scarred her, but he terrorized an entire community through his vitriol and hate. The victim's father and some residents of the apartment complex where this happened had to witness this horrific attack. Her father and a Good Samaritan tried to intervene and stop McCallion, and residents of the apartment complex called the police and shouted from their apartments to direct members of the Ossining Police Department, who rushed to the scene and arrested McCallion. These were the heroes of that day in the face of such horror. Standing with me today are some of those heroes. First and foremost, I am so honored to have standing with us today the father of the victim, Sept and a family member, Kim Matthews. Also standing with me today are Ossining Police Chief Kevin Sylvester, Detective Jeff Chavez, and Lieutenant Aaron Zimmerman, whose department arrested McCallion and provided aid to the victim, and then worked with my office to investigate and prosecute the case. Also standing with me is Bureau Chief Luana Hawkeiser, who, together with Bureau Chief Laura Murphy, worked tirelessly to charge and prosecute McCallion. We are also joined by Chief John Hodges of the Westchester County Department of Public Safety, whose expertise with weapons was invaluable in this case. During a subsequent search of McCallion's apartment where he lived with his father, police recovered numerous weapons, including 2 loaded assault weapons, as well as Nazi paraphernalia, a Confederate flag, a gas mask, and a tactical vest. On September 9th of this year, McCallion pled guilty to the entire indictment with which he was charged, 14 felony counts, including attempted murder in the 2nd degree as a hate crime, and multiple counts of assault and weapon charges. Today, a judge in the courthouse sentenced McCallion to 15 years in state prison with 5 years of post-release supervision for these crimes. That sentence, indeed no sentence, can make the victim whole again. Earlier today, I met with Mr. Duboulet and Ms. Matthews, the victim's family. It is my hope that the resolution of this case will at least provide some peace, some measure of justice to the victim and to her family who have endured unbearable trauma and pain. I and her family also recognize that hate crimes like this one are not only acts of violence against an individual victim, they are crimes against entire communities and groups of people who are left feeling unsafe and vulnerable following attacks like this one. We chose to publicize this case with her family's blessing because there is an important message to be heard. This case must serve as a warning, as a wake-up call about how vicious and divisive rhetoric and hateful propaganda can turn dangerously violent when consumed by certain people. We will not publicize today the hateful symbols that were found on the paraphernalia in Robert McCallion's apartment that he shared with his father. But we must guard against crimes of violence like this one by standing up as a community and a country to those who peddle bigotry and hate. And my office will continue to aggressively prosecute to the fullest extent of the law possible those like Robert McCallion who perpetrate these despicable acts of violence. Now I'd like to invite Ossining Police Chief Kevin Sylvester to speak.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to take a brief moment to acknowledge the fine work of our detectives, Lieutenant Zimmerman, Detective Chavez, and the investigators who worked with them. Today's a fine example of what we can accomplish with teamwork from the Westchester County Department of Public Safety, the District Attorney's Office, and our partners at the FBI. As much as we want to acknowledge that good work, today's a troubling moment for our department, for our community. Ossining is a place that prides itself on diversity and inclusion. It's not only where I work, it's my home where I raise my children. This is a tough moment for us to look at this, a place that's worked so hard to make sure that everybody feels safe in our community. And something I've learned through a long career in law enforcement is that sentencing are not the end. For many of us, we're going to walk away today and this will be the end of the story, but for this victim and her family, today is merely a milestone in their journey. And our hope is that through this little bit of, through this moment, that they'll be able to find a foothold in their journey towards healing. So thank everybody for coming today.
Thank you. We can take a few questions on point, on topic. Yeah.
So sometimes when we cover terror investigations that are motivated by religious extremism, authorities talk about a path to radicalization. Can you help us with that, with this McCallion character?
So I think it's fair to say that this is someone who was radicalized, who was influenced by outside rhetoric and forces. We know from looking at searches on his phone, for example, that he was looking at white nationalist type of organizations. There was paraphernalia, as I referenced, in his apartment. And I think that is an important part of this story, it's not a story, of this event, of this crime. Because people sometimes don't necessarily think about the impact of their words, of their policies, of their rhetoric on people like McCallion, which takes no responsibility away from Mr. McCallion. But it is to get someone to the point where they act this viciously and with this much hate. It can come from a lot of different sources. Any other questions?
I had one other question. One of the crimes he was charged with was a vicious assault on a nurse practitioner at the Westchester County Jail. Is there any indication that there was racial animus involved in that attack?
No. Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,